Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. This is our 2013 Mitsubishi Fuso FG that is absolutely refusing to start, but I'm not going to let it win. Over the past several months, there are a lot of things I've tried to get this 4P10 to start. Today, I've got two more things that I'm going to try, and hopefully they'll lead me down the path to the answer. And what I'm going to ask for you to do is throw any crazy idea you can come up with down in the comments below, because something somewhere out there is the right answer. All right, so let's test out the first potential unknown. Are we actually injecting fuel? If all of these injectors are completely clogged with debris, nothing is going into the engine. Now, I do happen to have a spare injector off of my other engine. I have no idea if it's any good, but I did measure resistance on this injector and it matches the one in the truck, which I also don't know if it's any good, but neither of them are open line, so we're gonna give it a try. I would say this is a pretty crude test process, and I wouldn't suggest anyone try it at home or at work or at a friend's house. Just don't even try this, but I'm gonna try it. So I'm going to take off injector number 1 line, and my reasoning behind injector number 1, originally I was going to do injector 2 because there's a bit more space around it, but I need to be able to connect the return line, otherwise I'm going to have diesel all over the place. So the return line on number 1 is the end of the road, so I can take that line and reposition it. So injector line number 1 loosened. Let's stick our spare injector onto line number 1. I don't like the trajectory of that. It's going to be shooting fuel straight at me. Now, I will say, I don't know if that's going to reach. I'm only going to crank this for long enough that it might have the possibility to fire this injector once, because I don't want any fuel spraying around under here for any reason, especially atomized diesel. But we're going to see what happens. And here we have injector number 5 in place of number 1. Number 1's capped off, disconnected, the wire, the fuel supply, and it's a little hard to see, but down underneath there, the fuel return is actually connected. So I'm going to remove this protective cap, and for 2 reasons I'm going to put this shop towel over top of it. Number 1, it's going to give a little bit of protection of mist not going all over the place if it does fire. And number 2, it'll give me more opportunity to see if anything's actually come out, because I won't be able to see what's going on here. I don't want to be here. I'm going to be around the corner by the ignition of the truck. Now, before I crank that over, let me give you one of my theories. I don't think any fuel is going to come out of that injector, and I don't think it's because the injector is bad. What I think might be going on, and I really hope I'm wrong, is that the fuel pump that I took out, as well as the fuel pump that I took off that engine and put in, is not being driven by the engine. Why would I think something like that could be the cause? Well, let's look at what I've done. I've changed a mechanical fuel pump, no difference. I've changed an electric fuel pump, no difference. I've changed the fuel rail, which contains the regulating valve, no difference, which also contains the pressure sensor, no difference. I've changed the fuel lines. So really the only thing left in the system that I haven't changed is the engine, or what's driving the pump inside the engine. Let's take a look at the exploded diagram. In the upper right, we can see the fuel pump. Off the front of the pump, we have a floating shaft that runs through the pump support and then connects with the lower timing gear and the upper timing gear, and it's secured with a bolt. Now, these gears don't appear to be tapered, but they're driven by a friction fit and located by this little pin, number 27. So what happens if little number 27 shears in half? Let's look at it from the back. Here is the shaft that drives the pump, and on the front side, the timing gear. This gear is driven directly by the crank, but if the pin isn't locating this properly with the gears, the pump may not be spinning at all, or maybe the pump timing is off. The second gear on this shaft drives the cams, and it also spins the PCV filter, but I don't seem to have any codes for cam and crank timing being off, and I know the cams are turning because I timed the engine when I installed the pump.
Doesn't mean the top and bottom timing is correct, but it's all turning. Now they do seem to put emphasis on this little pin, and for those who disagree that the pump needs to be timed properly, well, I'm going to go with what Fuso or Iveco says.
Can you tell how much I hope that's not it? Because that is way deep inside there. And that's why I'm willing to try this first, because if I've got to take apart the whole front of the engine, flipping an injector is much easier. Now I did say there were two more things that I was going to try. The other one is on the other side of the truck. Once again, I don't think this is going to do it, but what if, just what if, this electric fuel pump isn't putting out enough pressure? I have swapped it out, but it's not the original. Now I do know that this pump is fully capable of running the truck because that's the pump that's in Pierre Carl's truck. I put it in there. What I don't know is there something wrong with this one and the one that I swapped it out with, and we're not quite building enough pressure to open a check valve or relief valve and actually push fuel all the way into the rail. Maybe the high pressure pump can crank, but I don't have anything in the rail, so I'm not cranking long enough to build enough pressure to fire the injectors. Again, I don't think so, but that electric fuel pump is such an easy thing to change, and I'll know right away if it's performing any differently because I know the one in there right now can produce 60 psi. If I put in a new one and it creates 120, maybe that's the difference. That's right, original equipment, Bosch 580-464-118, going in. So let's see what happens when we key the ignition on and the pump starts. I can hear that pump definitely pushing fuel. Get the sound of some air bubbles coming through here. Don't appear to have any leaks anywhere. Once again, good. Check down by the pump. Don't appear to have any leaks down here. That's good. And now the pump has kicked off. I'm going to stand beside the cab and crank the engine just a couple of times to see if we get any fuel out that injector. That definitely should have had fuel come out there. And that, to me, looks bone dry. I've taken this injector back off again, and interestingly, there was a reasonable amount of pressure when I cracked that line, both on the return and the supply. I expect, and it's pretty reasonable to assume, that that's just the fuel pressure from the electric lift pump. Even at 60 psi, it's nothing to laugh at, but it does prove I am getting fuel all the way to the injectors, at least at low pressure, so it shouldn't be a priming or a dry injector issue. So I want to get that out of the way, connect the rail back up to injector number 1 that's in the truck, lower the cab, and check the fuel pressure that that electric pump is putting out. So how much fuel pressure is the new electric pump putting out compared to the old electric pump? Let's take a look. Got our gauge installed. I just need to key the ignition on. And there we go, right on 60 psi. So that tells me that the aftermarket pump that I was running is putting out the exact same pressure as the OEM pump. I don't think that's the problem. And just for good measure, one more time with the injectors connected, all I've really changed is a fuel pump that still puts out the same pressure, but let's give it another try. I wasn't figuring so. So what have we proven this time? Well, I think beyond a reasonable doubt, this is not an issue with the electric lift pump. I've now been through 3 of them. The OEM pump is putting out the same pressure as the aftermarket that I've installed previously in other trucks that we know are working. And although it is possible, I think it's unlikely that a 5th injector would be faulty or plugged with debris if all 4 of these were plugged completely solid. Number 5 came from a different engine that wasn't having this issue. So I think this confirms us down to one of 2 issues. Number 1, the injectors aren't firing, which I'm pretty sure I confirmed through the LED test previously. Or number 2, we're actually not generating any fuel pressure. Is that because the second pump that went in is also faulty? I think that's unlikely. Or is it because the engine
isn't driving it.
Before I start ripping this engine apart to see how things work so that I can rip that engine apart, throw every single one of your thoughts or ideas into the comments below this video. Not only will it hugely help me, it should help anybody else who goes down this road in the future. Together with your thoughts and ideas, we will not let this engine win. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.